Continuing with our daily Gemara, we are in Sanhedrin Kuf Yud Aleph on Beis 111b. Towards the bottom of the page, after the Mishnah at the beginning of the Gemara. So it's the second line of the widest set of lines. The word is Ha'olam. First word is Ha'olam, and then there's the big Gimel Reish, which means Gemara. So the Talmud finished the Mishnah and goes to the Gemara. The Mishnah, as we discussed, is the law of the Ir HaNidachas, the city which has been diverted away from the service of Hashem and into idol worship. And it's a special law, as we described, and there's a bunch of details and conditions in order for a city to qualify as one such castaway city. And the city is put to death by sword, its property is burned. The details of how a city qualifies to be an Ir HaNidachas is going to be elaborated on momentarily, and therefore I won't reiterate it. I just want to point out at the moment that I made a mistake in one of the conditions, and it'll be clarified as we go along now in the Gemara's text. So the Gemara opens up with the words Tan Rabbanan, our sages taught. As is often the case, as we note here very often, the Gemara will open up its analysis of the Mishnah with the Mishnah H text that elaborates on the very Mishnah itself. So Tan Rabbanan, our sages said, and the text here, this Mishnah H text, is going to go through the verse in Devarim chapter Perek Chelek pasuk Yudalid, so it's Deuteronomy chapter 13 verse 14. That's where the Torah describes the law of the Ir HaNidachas, the law of the city which has been diverted away from the service of Hashem. And the Mishnah H text that the Gemara is quoting is going to go through this verse word by word and elaborate on it, deriving laws about how a city can qualify to be such Ir HaNidachas. So the verse begins, Yatsu, there came forth. So the verse reads, Yatsu Anashim B'nei Belial. I'll read the whole verse first so that you kind of get what's going on. Yatsu Anashim B'nei Belial. Men came forth who are bad people, Mikerbecha from amongst you, and they subverted and redirected the people of the city. Lamar saying, Nelcha, let's go V'navdal, Elakim B'cheim, let's go serve other gods, Asher lo yadatem, which you do not know of, meaning not you don't know me, you know me, says God, but these are other deities that are not known to you, they're foreign to you. So that's the verse. Now let's break down each word of the verse and derive the various laws which will teach us how and a city will qualify for an Ir HaNidachas. So the first word is Yatsu, they've come out. Says the Gemara, Hain, they themselves emerge, V'lo shluchin, and not their messengers, meaning if there were some people who themselves were too cowardly to convince people to serve idols, but they were acting, and therefore they sent agents. So the people who are convincing the city to serve idols are not themselves the originators of this idea. They're working as agents on behalf of somebody else. If that's the case, then the city does not qualify as Ir HaNidachas. The people themselves who have the idea, they have to be the ones to actually convince the city to serve idols. Anashim, the verse reads, there came forth Anashim, men. So men is in the plural. Ein Anashim, if the Gemara comments, Ein Anashim pachas mibeis. There is the minimum of plural is two, so there has to be at least two people, two men, who come forth to convince the rest of the city to follow idols, not one individual. Davar acher, another reading from the word anashim, another law derived from this word anashim, men. Anashim, there's got to be men who convince the city, two men, v'lo anashim, not women. Anashim, two men, v'lo tanim, and not children. Now the verse describes these people as b'nei Belial. We translated that as bad people, but in translating the understanding what this word means itself, says the Mishnah H text, the Brisa, Banim, sons or people, Sheparku ol Shamayim Etzavarem, who have threw off the yoke of heaven from their shoulders. The Gemara gets this from the word Belial. So take the word Belial and divide it into two. Beli, oil, without a yoke. So they are people who threw off the yoke of heaven. This is the end of the comment from the Gemara. Now, it's interesting because this comment seems to just be an interpretation of the verse. It doesn't have any halachic application. It just tells you what the word means when it says Belial. Whereas all the other interpretations of the verse have halachic application, this one does not. Perhaps, and this is just a suggestion of mine, I haven't seen this written in any work of halacha, but one might be able to derive some halacha from this as well, in that these bad people can't be people who are born bad. That the people who were good, but they cast off the yoke of heaven, and they are now endeavoring to some success to convince the people to also throw off the yoke of heaven and serve idols. but someone who is born that way doesn't qualify, maybe. Okay, the verse continues, Mikabecha, these two bad men who threw off the yoke of heaven came from amongst your midst, and therefore says the Rise of Limana Sefer, and not from the border. As Rashi explains, this means to say if there's a region that belongs to Jewish people and is bordering a non-Jewish region, and the city that is, or the place from which these people arrive to convince everybody else to serve idols, is not situated in the center of this mechuz, of this region, but rather at the border of the region, then the Torah says that cannot qualify as an Ir HaNidachas for this castaway city. It's only specifically mikrebecha, from within you implying from the center of your territory, not from the borders. The verse says, Yoshvei Iram, that these men who came forth from amongst you, from amidst you, from the center of the territory to convince you to serve idols, are people who dwell in your city, but they cannot be people who came from another city. Meaning, if people came from New York to convince people in Montreal to serve idols, it wouldn't make Montreal a Ir HaNidachas, a castaway city, with the special laws associated with that, as we described. But rather, they have to be people who are local men. Now, the verse says, Lamar, that these people are saying, they come to tell you, let us go and worship other idols. So, for the fact that the verse says, Lamar saying, this implies that they need to have witnesses and warning for each individual. Now, this is the mistake I made in reading the Mishnah. When I read the Mishnah, I associated this line that there has to be witnesses and warning, and described then at length what this means. That you have to have two witnesses who see the event and they warn the individual, saying that if you transgress if you're going to do this transgression, you're going to be liable for XYZ punishment. The person says, I don't care, and does it anyway, with all the prescribed issues that go along with that. Now, I said that this is only for someone who is an individual serving idols, but a city does not need that. Now, that was wrong. What this means actually is that each individual member of the city who worships idols must have witnesses and warning, which further compounds how difficult it is, and in fact, almost impossible to actually have an Ir HaNidachas. Because, as we mentioned, you have to have a majority of people in the city who actually are convinced and start to serve idols. Now, what this Gemara is telling us here, and the Mishnah as well, but I was mistaken when we learned it the first time, is saying that each individual member of the city, of the majority of the city, who worships idols, has to individually have two witnesses who warn each individual. Now, that makes it very difficult to actually happen. 51% of the city each have two witnesses warning them at the event. Each time, each one of them is going to go do serve idols. It makes it much more difficult to actually come to ever coming to a situation where there actually is an Ir HaNidachas, actually is a castaway city. Okay, so this is the end of the Mishnah age text, and these are the conditions that the Mishnah mentioned. Not all of them, but most of the conditions were already mentioned in the Mishnah. There's some new ones here as well, but these are the conditions that are required to make an Ir HaNidachas, make a city that gets the special law of being cast away, where the whole city is put to death by the sword and the property is burnt. Namely, the men they have to be men, adult men. They have to come from the city. They have to do it themselves. They can't be working as agents on behalf of somebody else. The city has to be at the center of the region, not at the border of the region. And each individual person who is serving idols has to be warned and have its own individual set of witnesses, making it very difficult for such a city to ever exist. And we're going to have discussion about that later, whether or not it exists and how it exists and if it can exist. We'll get to that at another occasion. Okay, the Gemara tells us like this: Itmar, we've been learnt. When the Gemara introduces a text with the word Itmar, it means it's from the Amaraic age, from the Gemara age, as opposed to Taner Rabbanim, which is the Mishnaic age, which is a text we just read. So Itmar, we learnt from the Amaraic age. Rabbi Yochanan says, it's possible for one city to be divided between two tribes, meaning to say, at the time when the Jews entered the land of Israel and they divided the borders based on a lot, they cast lots and they divided the borders as is described at length in the book of Joshua. So if the border landed in a city, so it means one city a border travels through a city. So Rabbi Yochanan says that the city can be split, and 70% of the city belongs to one tribe and 30% belongs to another tribe. But for Reish Lakish says, Ein Chelek Ir HaNidachas B'Shvatim. One city cannot be divided between two tribes. Rather, whichever tribe has the majority of that city in their border kind of takes over the whole city. So if it's a 70-30 split, then the whole city would go in favor of the tribe that has 70% of the city in its favor, in its territory. Now Rabbi Yochanan is going to use our Mishnah as proof to his opinion that cities can be split between two tribes. Astray, Rabbi Yochanan presented the following challenge to Reish Lakish. Whenever a challenge is introduced with the word Astray or Meisvei, it means we're going to be quoting a text that is greater than the one speaking. So in this case, Reish Lakish is a sage of the Gemara, an Amora, and Rabbi Yochanan is going to quote a Mishnaic age text, which is a Tanoim, the Tanaic age. So it's introduced, the challenge is introduced with the word Astray, as in Reish Lakish is being challenged from a source that's greater than himself. So what's the challenge? Our Mishnah said, and this is one of the conditions which was not mentioned in the Brayos that we just read earlier. Mishnah reads, in order for a castaway city, Ir HaNidachas, to qualify as Ir HaNidachas, the people who are convincing the rest of the people to follow idols, the two men, at least two men, have to be members of that city, and shevet from that tribe. Now, from the fact that the Mishnah says two conditions, that the people have to be from the same tribe and from the same city, means there must be the possibility for one condition to be met and not the other. Otherwise, just make it one condition. So let's just play it through. The two people who are coming forth to convince the rest of the city to worship idols have to be from A, the same tribe as the people of that city, and B, the same city. So let's think about this. If they come from that tribe, and the city must belong to one tribe, then if they come from the tribe, then automatically come from that city. Isn't that the case? It is possible, let's say, a big territory of one tribe that has two cities, and a person, let's say Montreal and New York, let's just say that, both belong to the tribe of Judah, and someone goes from Montreal to New York to convince people in New York to worship idols, God forbid. If they were all in the same tribe of Judah, then they met the condition of being the same tribe, but they didn't meet the condition of being from the same city, because one's from Montreal, one's from New York. But how is it possible for someone to be the reverse? Be from the same tribe, but not from the same city? I'm sorry, how is it possible for someone to be from the same city, but not from the same tribe? If each city must belong to one tribe, as Reish Lakish suggests, then that would mean if you came from the same city, certainly you come from the same tribe, and therefore the two conditions are redundant. And this is Rabbi Yochanan's proof that cities can be split. Because let's say Montreal is 70-30, 70 belong to Judah and 30 belongs to Shimon, let's say, and the person who convinced the city to worship idols came from the 30% that belongs to Shimon. So he's from the same city, but not from the same tribe. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can have one condition without the other, making it necessary for the Mishnah to tell us both conditions. But according to Reish Lakish, where each city belongs to only one tribe, then if the person came from that city, certainly he came from that tribe. And therefore, the two conditions are redundant. And that's what the Gemara is about to explain. So let's see. My love, is it not? Even though these two people who came forth to convince the rest of the city to worship idols are from the same city, if they are from the same tribe in good, if not, then they don't qualify. Meaning to say, there is the possibility for someone to be from that city and not be from that tribe. This seems to imply that one city could be divided into two tribes, so that there is the possibility of these two people meeting the condition of being from the same city, but not meeting the condition of being from the same tribe. But according to Reish Lakish, where each city only belongs to one tribe, and we don't split the cities between two tribes, then if this person who's convincing or these two people who convince the rest of the city to worship idols come from the same city, automatically they come from the same tribe. Why the redundancy of the two conditions when seemingly you could have said both conditions in one? Says the Gemara, loy. That's not true. It's possible that even though Reish Lakish says, even according to Reish Lakish, which says that each city only belongs to one tribe, nonetheless there is the possibility of someone being from that city but not from the same tribe. How is that? The nafla lebirusha. There is the possibility under certain conditions in which a daughter inherits a parent. So let's say there's a guy who's from the tribe of Judah, and his only inheritors are his daughter. Now his daughter married someone from the tribe of Shimon. Now this daughter has a son. Now this son comes from the tribe of Shimon, because that's who his father is. But he owns property in the territory of Judah, because his mother inherited her father from in the tribe of Judah, which would mean this guy, the third generation, could be from the tribe of Shimon and still live in a city in Judah. And that's how it's possible for someone to meet one condition without the other, even though the city only belongs to one tribe. Another possibility, he received it as a gift. This is a much simpler answer. If I'm from the tribe of Judah and I give it as a gift, and I give my home as a gift to someone from the tribe of Shimon, then this person can live here in the city that belongs to the tribe of Judah. So he comes from that city, but doesn't meet the condition as being from the same tribe as the rest of the city, because the rest of the city is from Judah, and I give him a gift, and he really belongs to another tribe, Shimon, or the reverse. Okay. So the dispute remains that both possibilities are possible. According to Rabbi Yochanan, a city could be split between two tribes, and then it's very simple how you can have one condition without the other. A person could be from the tribe of that city, but not from that city if he came from a neighboring town, or the person can come from the city but not from that tribe because he comes from the other part of town which is belonging to the other tribe. As according to Rabbi Yochanan, a city could be split between two tribes. According to Ir HaNidachas, where each city must belong to one tribe, there is still the possibility for both conditions to be met. A person can be from a different city, neighboring town that's in the same tribe, because that's easy. And likewise, a person can live in the city and still not belong to this tribe if he got it as if he got the property as a gift from somebody else, or if he inherited it through his mother, but he himself belongs to a different tribe. Okay. Astray, the following challenge is presented to Rabbi Yochanan. Again, astray is when we introduce a challenge with the word astray, it means we're quoting a text that's greater than the one speaking, and now we're about to quote a verse. A verse predates the Amoraic age and even the Tanaic age. So this is certainly the greatest and highest proof text to validate any opinion of the other or challenge any opinion. This is from the book of Yeshua, Perek Chelek, Pasuk Zayin. Book of Joshua, chapter 21, verse 16, where there it says, Ardim Tesha, there was a total of 9 cities, Me'es Shnei Shvatim Eila, that came from these two tribes, which was Yehuda and Shimon, Judah and Shimon. And those 9 cities were dedicated to the Levites. Now 9 is an odd number. So how do you split between Yehuda and Shimon 9 cities? My love, is it not? Arba Parga Mahai, 4.5 cities came from one of these two tribes, from Judah. The Arba Parga Mahai, and 4.5 came from the other city, from the other tribe, from Shimon, making it 9. Shmamina, and that would imply you could divide one city into two tribes. The verse just says that the total number of cities that were dedicated to the Levites, who didn't get any actual portion of the land, they only got certain cities donated to them by the tribes themselves, as described in the book of Joshua at length. And there it says that the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Shimon, who were neighbors, I believe, from their territories, 9 cities were devoted and dedicated to the Levites. Now, from the fact that the verse does not explicitly state who gave which city, and just says 9 in total came from these two, the simple reading is that 4.5 came, that's a even split. 4.5 came from Yehuda and 4.5 came from Shimon, which seems to imply that a city could be divided between two tribes. And this supports the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan rather than the opinion of Ir HaNidachas, which said that each city must be totally to one or another tribe based on which tribe has the majority of that city in their territory. Says the Gemara, no. It doesn't have to be split evenly, and this is the way we'll defend Ir HaNidachas. Arba Mahai, 4 of 9 came from one of the two tribes, from either Yehuda or Shimon. V'chamesh, and 5 cities, Mahai, came from the other one. Which means when the verse says that 9 cities were donated or given to the Levites by Yehuda and Shimon, it's not an even split. It's 4 and 5. But then the Gemara asks the obvious question, if that's the case, Lifresh Prushi, the verse should have stated who gave 4 and who gave 5. Why give a total number that isn't evenly split between two? In other words, if you're telling me that these two tribes give a certain amount, the simple reading is that they're split in half. Otherwise, tell me Yehuda gave 4 or 5 and Shimon gave 4 or 5, but the verse does not state explicitly who gave how much. And therefore the Gemara says, Kasha, indeed, this is a good question. Explaining the verse according to Ir HaNidachas is challenging. Because according to Reish Lakish, when the verse says a total of 9 cities were given to the Levites by the tribes of Judah and the tribes of Shimon, it's not split evenly, which makes it not an easy verse to read. And the Gemara leaves it at that. It's a challenge to Reish Lakish's view. And therefore, it would seem like the Gemara is siding with Rabbi Yochanan, who says that cities can be split in half. As that way, this verse would read more easily in that 9 cities total were given to the Levites by Shimon and Yehuda, and it's split even 4.5 and 4.5. Okay, now the Gemara says as follows: Iboilahu are on top of Kufya Beis Amud Aleph 112a. Iboilahu, the following question was raised. Now, whenever the Gemara introduces a question with the words Iboya, it means it's an inquiry. It means the person who's asking the question doesn't have any agenda. Unlike when we say Astray, which is a challenge. The person asking the question has an agenda. He's trying to prove his point by challenging the other view. But here, the question is introduced with the boilahu or ba'amine or other such ways of saying the same thing. The root word being ba'i. Then it's an inquiry, meaning the person asking the question has no agenda, just wants to know what the truth is. So boilahu, the following question was raised: if the city on their very own just culturally started going towards idol worship, there was no specific individuals who came along and convinced the rest of the city to follow idol worship. Mahu, what's the law? On the one hand, I might say, the verse says, and they were subverted, they were pushed away from worshiping God and pushed towards serving idols. That's what the verse states, which would imply, but not that they went on their own. The verse says they were pushed, not on their own. Or perhaps, no, when the verse says, and they were pushed by others, it doesn't mean that they must be pushed by others, but rather, even if they were pushed by others. In other words, when the verse says that the whole city was convinced by 2 people to worship idols, or the majority of the city was convinced by people to worship idols, does that mean that it's specifically only when they were convinced by others, or is it even if they were convinced by others? If it means specifically if they were convinced by others, then if the city just gradually went toward, gravitated towards idol worship, then they don't qualify, because they have to be specifically convinced by 2. Or if we read the verse to mean even if they're convinced by others, then for sure if they went on their own, they qualify as an Ir HaNidachas. So which way is the correct reading? Tashma says the Gemara, come and listen. The following proposed resolution. Our Mishnah and the Braisa, the text we read earlier, says the law is, the verse says men came forth and convinced the rest of the town to worship idols, which means if women did or children did, then it doesn't count. Says the Gemara, why shouldn't it count? Amai. Let it be. Let a city that was convinced by women and children to follow idol worship, let that be equal to a city that went on its own. In other words, like this, what the Gemara is saying is like this: if you're going to take the side which is that a city that on its own just gravitated toward idol worship does not qualify as an Ir HaNidachas, then I'm sorry, if you're going to say, considering the fact that we know that women that convince the rest of the city to follow idol worship, or children that convince a city to follow idol worship, that city does not qualify as the castaway city. From the fact that we know that, it's implied that if they go on their own, it's not either qualified as a city that worships idols. Because why should they be any different? Why should a city that goes on its own be any different than a city that women and children convince to go? From the fact that we're saying the verse says specifically men and not women, not children, means specifically men and not if they went on their own. Says the Gemara, no. Don't compare a city that was convinced by women and children to follow idol worship to a city that went on its own. Hanach, basan of shayo gridi, a city that went on its own, they followed their own hearts, and therefore maybe they should be treated more harshly, whereas hani basan of gridi, where these people were actually following the hearts of women and men, and therefore maybe shouldn't be judged as harshly. So the fact that women and children who convince a city to worship idols don't make the city qualify as a city that, as an Ir HaNidachas, a castaway city, is not the same as a city that gradually went on its own. A city that gradually went on its own should be held more accountable because they actually went to serve idols, whereas following women and children is kind of like their hearts are drawn after them, the people's hearts are drawn after them, and therefore they follow them down a bad path. And therefore this question remains unresolved. What's the law of a city that on its own gravitated towards idol worship? No resolution is found, But if I'm not mistaken, the general principle is that when it comes to matters of life and death, which this is, because if they're found guilty, they are put to death, we go lenient. That's the general rule, but I don't see that written here anyway, and especially considering the fact that over here, it's not necessarily a leniency, because if they're not considered a castaway city, then they're judged as individuals who worship idols, and they're also put to death. So, I don't know what the resolution to this problem is. Okay, God willing, tomorrow, more details on how we come to a conclusive result on deciding whether or not a city actually is a castaway city. More details to come, God willing, tomorrow. A wonderful day.